big buzzword in the automotive and car industry today is connected cars or vehicles. And to tell us more about it, may I present our speaker for this session, Mr. Daron Gifford, Management Consulting Partner, Plante, Moran. Mr. Daron Gifford is a senior business leader with over 40 years of experience in solving problems in complex environments across a wide range of industries, especially focused in the automotive and manufacturing segments. Daron's views and expertise have been sought after around the world as a trusted business advisor in guiding strategic direction for businesses, assessing commercial and technology strategies, designing operational business plans, and supporting strategies related to merger and acquisition opportunities. Mr. Gifford, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. And I appreciate my bio is also not the most exciting written up there, but I will tell you, one of the interesting challenges in the industry that I've seen, and I've worked around the automotive industry for over 40 years and in consulting now for over 30 years. And as the title of our conference would indicate, this disruptive change that's happening to the auto industry over the next 5 to 10 years, similar to healthcare, as Sajid talked about, will transform the auto industry in ways that none of us would have envisioned a few years ago, and maybe none of us can actually picture completely today. So I'm going to talk about the auto industry and just give you some perspective on what some of those changes will look like. Thank you. First, let me give you a little introduction to Plante Moran. You may not have heard of Plante Moran. We are based in the United States, actually very close to where HTC's headquarters are in Troy, Michigan. We're in Southfield, which is another suburb there. We have been in operation, as you see on the right corner, since 1924. So we're coming up on 100 years in existence, started by two individuals, Hilaria Plante and Frank Moran in those days, and started off in accounting primarily. So accounting, then moved into tax, now into management consulting as well. I'd also like to quickly introduce a couple of my colleagues from Plante Moran based in our Mumbai office. They're seated over here. If you'd stand, please. So we have Somil Shah, who heads our cybersecurity practice here, and Ronak Shah, who heads our tax practice here. And so if any of you want to speak to those folks about cybersecurity or tax, please go see them at the break. And especially, I know taxes never change in India, right? So Ronak, he's very busy, so he broke this out of his schedule to come here today. So thank you very much, guys. But we have over 5,000 clients, and 500 of those are over 500 are automotive clients as well. And we have a very broad set of services, as I mentioned: tax, security, also information systems, support, the operations, and also the strategy consulting area, which I lead for Plante Moran, as well as the automotive industry. We have an investment bank. We have real estate consulting capabilities as well. So let's talk about the automotive industry and these disruptive megatrends, we'll call this. And we've highlighted 5 that we have done quite a bit of research on. And the last one we'll spend the rest of the presentation to talk about, which is mobility technology. And you see in the blue there, and AKA meaning also known as the connected vehicle. Before we get into that, I'll talk about the first 4 briefly. The top one, and if there's some of you are from the automotive industry in the audience here, would recognize that the whole change in mass and weight reduction of the vehicles themselves, making them lighter and making them new materials or different materials, is something that's continuing to undergo a big change in the industry itself and in the vehicle itself. And Ford, for example, as many of you have heard about with the big truck, went to an aluminum body on that truck, which was a major change and a disruptive force in the materials in the industry. But there's many other materials as well that are coming into play, such as carbon fiber and composites, and also even lighter and higher strength steels, or what they call ultra high strength steels, to make these vehicles all lighter, to make them much more efficient for fuel economy as well as for environmental friendliness. The second, fewer and combined vehicle architectures. And if you think about the industry, just like anything, there's an architecture to the vehicle itself and how it's constructed. And many of the automobiles today, if they were created for each particular country or industry in the world, at least historically, in the last few years this has become more consolidated because all the automakers, they invest billions of dollars in bringing out a new vehicle, and so it's very expensive. They've gone to combining these architectures to make them common and global across the world in order to defray that cost, to amortize it, if you want to think of it that way. And so many vehicles now run off of the same platform in every country around the world. And some of the best examples, actually Volkswagen may be one of the best, where they have what they call the MQB platform, which is their sedan. They're a car, basically, that they plan to produce 5 to 6 million vehicles off just that one common architecture, but around the world. So wherever you buy that vehicle, it may have a different nameplate, it may have a different design on the top of it, but underlying is the same architecture. That helps reduce their costs significantly. That has a big impact on suppliers, because now the award on parts for those vehicles becomes a global award in many cases, and not just a local country award. The third, targeted and emerging market growth, is an area that for automakers is continuing to grow from the standpoint of the mature countries are slowing as far as the growth that may occur there. So in the United States and North America, we have a record sales in vehicles last year, but the potential for growing is limited because there's only so many people that will buy vehicles there. In fact, as we'll talk about with some of the trends later, it may also be on the decline with the amount of sharing that may occur in the future. We'll talk about sharing in that regard. But countries such as India or Vietnam or Malaysia, especially Asia, but also Eastern Europe, tremendous growth potential exists here because so much of the population does not own a car yet or does not have a car, may not have access to their own transportation. So that's where quite a bit of investment is occurring in the future around what we're calling these emerging markets, India being probably one of the largest ones in that regard. The fourth topic, next generation powertrains, is really heavily focused on what changes after the internal combustion engine. And I think Sajid pointed out that the steam engine was one of the big innovations, and going back over 100 years ago. That turned into the internal combustion engine with gasoline used in that case, or diesel in some cases. What hasn't changed on the powertrain since then really is how it works. As far as the engine's there's a transmission, there's a drive shaft that drives the wheels. The electrification of the vehicle has the opportunity to dramatically change how that power is transferred from the source, which would be a battery in that case, or it could be a battery that's regenerated by a small engine like a generator, something to that effect that would actually take electricity to power those wheels. And it would just require, instead of a larger transmission, a small gearbox to drive the wheels. So it'd all be through electric current. A very dramatic change in the powertrains, a very dramatic change to all the suppliers of those components. So that's another one of those areas that crosses over into mobility technology and changes it. But the fifth mega trend in here I want to highlight, and we'll talk the rest of the time about today, is around mobility technology and the connected vehicle. And what do we mean by the connected vehicle? As far as the impact on areas such as the ability to drive the car or for the car to drive itself, such as what Hal may have done in the movie that Sajid talked about, but also the ability to sense other vehicles around them, to talk to other vehicles, to talk to outside the vehicles to others, but then also the ability to how do I share that vehicle with other people as well? Is it really efficient for me as a vehicle, and how do I use that technology to get transportation from point A to point B? So we'll talk about that, but we want to talk about that also in the interest of, one of the challenges we have today, and I know that Sajid also asked you about your smartphones. I think almost everyone in here has a smartphone, I believe. Is that fair? How many of you actually know how to drive a car, too? Can you raise your hand? It's almost, even if you don't know, you should know how to drive a car. So when you have your smartphone and you're driving a car, you're a connected vehicle. Not a very safe one. That's one of the challenges, because safety is one of the real challenges on this whole connected vehicle idea. And what does that mean? And one of the challenges I know from the United States that we've seen, and we see that in every country around the world, is the combination of this connectivity, this smartphone, along with driving a car, has actually decreased the safety on the roads. So in the United States, for example, we had many years of decreasing accidents and deaths from accident until the last 3 years. And each of the last 3 years it's gone up by not 1 or 2%, by 10, 15%. So that in last year, 2016, we actually had 40,000 people killed in accidents on the streets in the United States, our country alone. Globally, what I understand as well, it's well over 500,000 people. As the head of the Traffic and Safety Administration in the United States would say, at that rate, if it was an airline, that would be like two 747s crashing every week. You wouldn't let the airlines fly if that happened, right? You would shut them down after probably maybe even the first one, but definitely the second one. So, but in cars, we seem to be very tolerant. It doesn't make any sense, right, from the standpoint of risk to us. And we're not helping ourselves because distracted driving is causing most of these accidents. So safety is really one of the key aspects of this idea of the connected vehicle and mobility technology. And moving from safety to what I call safe autonomy. And so the regulations are growing because of this safety issue that we're facing. And I believe this is also what's going to help drive the technology advancements in the automobile even faster than what we have seen so far. So historically in the past, we've seen what I call passive safety, which really only started in the 70s, so it's only 40 or so years old, where seatbelts were required in vehicles. Before that, there were no seatbelts. So if you had an accident, you just went flying. Then we went to airbags. That was only about probably 25 years ago with airbags. And now we've gotten more sophisticated with airbags all around you. But that's passive because it's when you get in an accident, it's to protect you. Today, we are really focused in on active safety. And that's where there are many sensors embedded in the vehicle, all with computer processors monitoring and managing them. So we have forward collision warnings, we have adaptive cruise controls, we have lane departure warnings where it tells you when you're moving outside of the right lanes. All these signals to tell you what's going on, as well as to potentially take control of the vehicle at certain points in time. Some of the simple ones even are on self-parking, which you may see, which where the car parks itself or parallel parks itself, which is probably good because most of us don't really parallel park very well. But in the future, this idea of connectivity and connected autonomous mobility has from that perspective, can really take us to another dimension where you have fully autonomous capable vehicles. So you may have the option to drive it or let it drive itself for you. They may communicate with each other and communicate directly in order to reduce collisions, to adjust speeds, to optimize traffic flow, all those kinds of activities like you see in the picture here, which in a place, especially like a place like Chennai, would be quite interesting to see if we can optimize traffic flow here. Right? But the connected car is actually much broader than just the safety part. The shaded area here indicates really only the safety perspective on the connected vehicle, where you can see, if it's a little fine in the print there, where it's actually communicating with other vehicles, with infrastructure, potentially with the GPS, with traffic, as far as traffic flow. But actually one of the better traffic flow opportunities isn't GPS as much as it is other cars itself. And so there are applications like Waze. Have people heard of Waze? Use Waze here? Yeah, it's a great application, isn't it, to tell you what's going on around you. And you get it from other vehicles that are around you that want to participate. So once you have that capability, then you realize how valuable it can be. But it really is to help you in the driving process. And much of that is critical on a real-time basis, and it needs to be thinking very quickly. Hence the whole use of artificial intelligence that was talked about earlier, and we talked about in a bit as well, is going to be of crucial importance as well, because the computer itself needs to be able to react and think and recognize what's occurring. One of the best, I didn't play the video today, but there's a video that's from a technology company called NVIDIA, where they embed some of their AI learning software into the vehicle to learn how to drive the vehicle off-road with no lane markers. It doesn't go very fast, but it's learning constantly from the sensors around it what it maybe look like. Just like your eyes might look at the road and or to look at the landscape actually, to try and avoid rocks, boulders, dips in there. And it successfully drives off-road for about a mile or so. It's quite fascinating to see how it can learn as it's maneuvering around. And that will be critical, especially in this transition period over the next few years, where not all the cars will be self-driving. The vast majority will still be self-driving by people like you and I, and we make lots of mistakes, and that's one of the challenges. But the other parts of the technology are quite interesting when you're actually connected and communicating to everything outside the vehicle. So from the standpoint of in the upper left corner, the insurance companies, for example, they want to know more about you, and the underwriting process will have a big impact. And so if you're actually driving safer, or if you're driving a self-driving car to avoid accidents, your insurance rates should go down, right? That's fair. The insurance companies may argue that a bit, but eventually they do have to go down. And another part of that that I've talked about with Sajid and others is that there's another tangential impact, which is a benefit, which is healthcare. So if you actually have fewer accidents that cause deaths, then there's been a study by insurance company Marsh that indicates that actually the number of transplants that are available for people will go down by 20 to 30%. So from the healthcare standpoint, it's positive because there's fewer accidents and deaths. From the healthcare system standpoint, it may be challenging because there may be a shortage of organs available in the future. So there's all these aspects that could be very helpful. Being able to communicate and contact people of what's occurring would be important. You also see on here service centers to remind you about the vehicle itself, to make sure the vehicle doesn't break down on you. That real-time communication would be important. Communication back to the dealer or to the stores. They want to know more about you as well, so they'll be seeking this data to find out more about you. The surrounding points of interest. So if you're driving along and you want to find, if you're driving along in some of the roads here and you want to find a particular landmark, not everything's quite as majestic as the Taj to be able to see it. So, but there may be something smaller that you want to see. It'll guide you there. The manufacturers and suppliers as well. They want to know what's going on with the vehicle so they can improve it and make it better in the future and make it more attractive for you. So there's all these aspects of the vehicle have the opportunity to create this environment of, I've heard it called also the home or the office on wheels. So it becomes your space, your opportunity then to not lose touch with what's going on, but also have all these other things happening that you don't have to worry about, that are occurring for you. And for that, there's lots of intelligence that needs to occur in the technology. It comes with a risk and a challenge. And Jeff will talk about it a bit, Jeff Bell as well, but cybersecurity in the connected vehicle is a potential problem. And there's been examples of that already. But with all this technology happening inside the vehicle itself, this particular schematic is showing 15 different points of entry into the vehicle today, as we know it. And there's over 100 computer processors on the typical vehicle today. If you think about a hacker, this is like heaven to them to try and go in and jump into something like this. So preventing this hacking is going to be critical for many of the automakers to understand how to put those barriers up to stop that. But some of it is not intentional. There may be unintentional vulnerabilities that occur as well. It could be crosstalk on signals, things that interfere with it. So there's all these different potential threats, and we list a few of those down below as well, which could be also some threats that occur. But the more control we give to the vehicle, then the more opportunities there are to lose control if we're not careful and we don't have a very, very secure environment out there. So mobility technology and this whole idea of autonomous vehicles and connected car, people kind of say, well, that sounds like science fiction. So it's not going to be here anytime that soon. I think it's going to be here very fast. And these are just a few of the announcements by the major OEMs and some of the dates that they've announced autonomous vehicles up here. So Toyota says autonomous freeway capabilities in 2020, just to start at the top. GM is planning that by 2020 as well. The red one, Tesla, you see on there, interestingly, has self-driving to some extent today, but they plan on fully autonomous next year. All the others, almost all of them, within the next 3 to 5 years, will have a level of self-driving and connected capability. The lower right-hand corner, you see the shaded box. These are some new interesting players in the auto industry. Uber, Google, Apple. They're all investing into autonomous technology and into self-driving and they want to be connected to you in the vehicles itself. So that's why I say, also known as the connected vehicle, they don't want to just self-drive. They want to know you. They want to be part of they want you to be part of their world and for them to be part of your life constantly. They don't want to lose track of that time when you're spending an hour in the vehicle where you're gone in the future. So major investment occurring throughout the industry in the many billions and billions of dollars. And the challenge for the auto industry, the guys in the lower right-hand corner, the technology companies, have a lot of cash available if they want to invest in that. So I think the market value of Apple is still well above $600 billion, and I believe their cash is around $200 billion or somewhere in that range. So they have enough cash if they wanted to buy several of these these large automotive companies out here. Another technology related to this that will be integral as well, I believe, to this whole idea of the connected car will be sharing. And that really changes the user model. And the challenge with sharing today is access. And as we talk about sharing, we'll talk about a few of the points in here about what's driving sharing and the whole idea of sharing vehicles. Because sharing occurs today. It's just much more you and I talk to each other. But the vehicles today are underutilized much of the time. Because when they get parked, just as they're parked here at the hotel, they sit there while you're sitting here. So they're not utilized. In fact, most studies have indicated there may be at best 5% utilization on the vehicle. Even when you go home at night, it's sitting there, and you're sleeping. So it's not a very good return. If you had a factory that you were running, and you had a 5% utilization, I think, does anybody have manufacturing plants here? Or manufacturing knowledge? You probably wouldn't you'd shut the plant down, right? If it was operating that low of a utilization. Our cars, we don't seem to worry about as much. But there's more consciousness of occurring of that on the vehicle itself now. So we're looking for more cost-effective alternatives. Autonomous self-driving has the capability, along with connection and connectivity, of making that link and providing the access to those vehicles that's missing today, which really would drive sharing in the future. The other part of this as well is that there's a generation of people younger than me, younger than most of us up here on the stage, which are looking for ways for more convenience and more access to transportation, also at a lower cost, because the cost of the vehicle is what's really hurting the ability for many young people to buy a car today. So sharing actually helps that significantly. The sharing models, we've seen some today. So personal driver would be like an Uber or a driver here. The fleets are coming into vogue, which would be a point-to-point sharing, like a rental, where you pick it up at one spot, drive it somewhere else. And then carpooling, which has been around for a long time, but this would be using technology to link together yourself with others that you may not know as intimately as your next-door neighbor for carpooling. But the real key in this case, to me, is the convergence of these technologies. So we see on the y-axis vehicle control moving from self-driving to autonomous, and vehicle ownership going from private to shared. And this access capability will really disrupt the business model when you put the two of those together, because now it's not nearly as critical that I own the vehicle itself to have access to that piece of transportation in order to get to that point where I need to get to in a very fast, efficient, more cost-effective way than I have in the past. And all the vehicle systems will change as a result of these technologies. And the idea of sharing and self-driving will impact not only just the way that the car may look different in the future, because we don't care as much if we're sharing about what the car looks like. It may affect the chassis as far as the transmission and shifting, and we want a much smoother ride. And the powertrain as well. We may not want it to drive it as fast. We may not be able to if it's self-driving, because it's going to adapt to whatever speeds are there. And then the interior. The interior is interesting because the interior may change dramatically in the future, because once we get into a self-driving type of vehicle, as you see on these two examples, the one on the right, the seats swivel around and face each other, and the steering wheel pushes into the dash, and so you don't have to have control. Now you're much more conscious of the environment that you're in. You want something that's comfortable and something that's more that feels better, that may be more plush, that may feel more comfortable, as well as having more comforts in there for putting your cup of coffee, things like that. So dramatic changes, and you'll want it clean. That would be the other aspect. So there's a lot of things that would change in your experience as a passenger or a user in the vehicle itself. So to set the stage for all these things, we use our own approach to working with our clients to talk about what's this mean to your business in the automotive industry and all this technology change, and thinking about that from a business and a technology perspective. So really looking at your core competencies and the market, where it's going, to really developing a plan for where your business model may be taking you in the future. And that's what I lead in the strategy group, as well as thinking through how does that strategy impact your business so that you can not just survive in the future, but then grow with all this technology change that's occurring. And so with that, I'd like to wrap up as far as the discussion about this disruptive change in mobility, and take any questions if we have a little time here. Thinking about that, one of the slides that I thought I was including, but I must have pulled out, was actually around IBM Watson, because we talked about that a little bit earlier. And one of the technology companies I didn't show, but actually they're investing in the transportation industry as well, is IBM. And Watson actually powers a vehicle in Washington, D.C. right now that they're testing in the public roads there called Olli. You probably, O-L-L-I. So if you Google it, you'll find a video on there about Olli, this self-driving small van that's taking people from point to point in what they call the National Harbor, and very effectively, apparently, from what I've heard. So it's quite interesting that Watson is also learning about self-driving and where to take people. No questions? Okay, thank you very much.
If you do have any questions, please write them on the index sheets kept in front of you on the tables. Thanks so much for so succinctly sharing such interesting facts about technologies that drive connected cars and their possible uses, especially in making driving safe.